I would love to introduce Anjali Tumrukota. She's a chief of staff. She is responsible for driving Taulia's people operation policies, procedure, and programs, as well as the CEO strategic initiatives forward, including communicating and managing deliverables across the business. Since joining Taulia in 2013, Anjali has been instrumental in ensuring the talent acquisition and people operations processes are as smooth as possible. When not working, you can find Anjali discovering a new brunch spot around town. Very jealous. I do love brunch. And then we've also got Dana L. Wilson on the line. Dana L. Wilson is an experienced financial professional with over 15 years in the financial services industry. She graduated from North Carolina Central University, where she received her Bachelor's of Business Administration with a marketing concentration. Dana is a founder and CEO of CHIP, a B2B2C financial services marketplace that makes it easy to find Black and Latinx financial professionals. Before starting CHIP, Dana has had experiences at firms such as Merrill Lynch, State Farm, SunTrust Bank, SunTrust Investment Services, a boutique firm on Wall Street, and most recently ran her independent advisory practice, Active Financial Planning, before joining Manhattan Wealth as an independent financial advisor. Dana was also a previous startup coach for Apps Without Code, where she taught entrepreneurs the fundamentals of business planning and sales and marketing strategies to grow their businesses further. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to you two, and thank you both for being here today.
Absolutely. It's like half the battle is remembering to unmute yourself.
I know. I kept saying in my head, unmute, make sure. I have a habit of talking without unmuting myself.
No, this virtual world is still an adjustment, even after almost over a year now. It's still what it is, but super happy to be here. This is such an important conversation. I was really looking forward to having it. So let's get into everything, Anjali. So let's definitely kick this off by learning more about you and your career path and kind of how you got where you are.
Yeah, totally. So I was born and raised in Southern California. And I came up to the Bay Area because I attended UC Santa Cruz. Go Banana Slugs. After graduating, I worked in the management training program at Enterprise, and then worked at a staffing agency for a brief amount of time before getting introduced to my current company, Taulia. I remember checking out the website before going in for my interview and thinking what a cool place to work this company looked like. And in 2013, when I started, Taulia had 80 full-time employees and I think 4 locations or so. I ended up getting the role, which was a recruiting coordinator role, and helped build out the recruiting function at Taulia. Prior to that, recruiting was done through the help of external recruiters. So being part of a startup, you are just constantly wearing multiple hats, as you are very aware.
The doer of all things.
Doer of everything.
Like on a moment-to-moment basis.
I agree. I don't even think startups should have job descriptions. I think it should just be come here and like whatever we need, that's what you're going to do at the time. So of course, being in recruiting, naturally, I was also helping out with HR projects as well. And I really enjoyed them. So eventually I became a people and talent specialist and then a generalist. And about 4 years into me being at the company, our CEO, Cedric Brew, asked if I would like to take the position of chief of staff, essentially helping him manage internal projects, communications, and culture within the company. I said yes, but wanted to ensure I was still able to work on HR projects because that's truly where my passion was and is. And so we made my role about 50% chief of staff and 50% HR. And now I've been at Taulia almost 8 years. Oh my goodness. And we just crossed the 300 employee mark a few weeks ago. And we have 8+ locations. I'm going to say plus because I think there's more, but 8+. And I'm still in the chief of staff position and also co-lead our HR team with our amazing director of people, David Grimes.
Wow, it's so amazing. It's like when we start to really think back and sketch out our careers, how long we've actually been somewhere, and we can kind of see the evolution.
Yeah, it's so funny.
And we forget, right? We forget all the things that we've actually done and completed.
Totally, totally. It's funny because I was looking back at some previous performance reviews of my own, right? And you have all the accomplishments. And I was looking at one, I was like, I wonder what I accomplished my first quarter at Taulia, and to see the types of things that you're working on and the struggles that the company is going through at the time versus now it's so interesting. And I think it's really important to look back so you remember all those things too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking back and just kind of discovering where you've been as an individual within a company, and then also just kind of the transition of the company too. I think that's the beauty really in the startup world, or working with any business that is just building up to fruition, is to see all the changes, right? The changes in leadership, the changes in employees, especially in the seat that you sit in. I'm sure you've seen so many things and can have so many stories that we probably don't even attack today. Maybe at another private
over a glass of wine sometime.
Oh my goodness, I can only imagine. But Taulia just recently won the 2020 Comparable Award for Best Leadership Team. What really makes that team strong leaders, especially as we look at the changing times of financial services, especially within financial technology? How has the leadership really changed there to go where it's going into this more global market that we're living in?
Definitely. So first off, the Comparably Awards are super meaningful to us as a company because unlike many other awards, they're actually awarded based on feedback from employees. So truly an honor that this comes straight from our employees. In terms of what makes Taulia's leadership team so unique, I think there's a couple of things. First and foremost, it's approachability. Our CEO that I mentioned before, Cedric, he ends almost every staff meeting by just reiterating the fact that he has an open door policy, that you could call, text, Slack, email him about anything under the sun. And people take him up on that too. I've worked for managers in the past where I haven't felt that comfortable doing that even with them. So to be able to feel that safe to share comments, questions, concerns with your CEO make a huge difference. I think secondly, the leadership team truly leads by example. One of the things that I love about Taulia is whether you're an intern or a C-level, you still have to follow the same processes and same way of doing things. I really miss being in the office and hearing our CFO, Renee Ho, complaining about how much he hates filling out JIRA tickets to IT, but we all have to do it, right? Even him. So
I don't miss about corporate.
JIRA tickets. No, totally. And so, this feeling of no one is better than someone else or too big to help with something carries through the company. And I think that starts from the top. So I think those are the two things that really make our leadership team unique.
Yeah, and I think having that open door policy is so critical, especially in today's times where there's so much conversation going on around culture and what culture fit means and values, and really seeing that represented at the top in a space where, hey, you can talk about these things, you can be open if there's something bothering you. It does make a difference when someone actually says it versus you just feeling like, I'm not really sure if I can even voice my opinion, right? It's like being able to at least say, hey, we have this open door policy here, and you should feel comfortable stepping into that no matter what it is so critical. So it's great to hear that you all have instituted that there. Do people really take advantage of really kind of understanding that and walking in that? And how does that conversation often happen, especially in difficult times, that we're in right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's interesting is when he became CEO, it was a few years ago now, he kind of started saying this, I have an open door policy, almost to the point where I was like, is this too much? Are you saying this too much? But I think yes, is it too, are you saying it too much? But I think it's really necessary and it's crucial to reiterate something over and over. So it's not just a one-time, one-off thing that you're putting out there and people kind of forget about it. I think it's important to keep that conversation going. But I'll give you an example. When the pandemic started, we had no idea what was happening. I don't think the world knew what was happening, what was going to happen, not only in our personal lives, but for professional lives as well. And, one thing that I heard a lot from our employees was they just appreciated the transparency that our leadership team, and especially Cedric, shared. He started doing weekly meetings with the whole company, just saying, look, this is where we're at. This is what our business looks like this week. This is what it's looking like in general. This is what we're thinking at this point. We don't know, even 1 month in the future, how this is going to affect our business, but I'm going to be transparent and I'm going to open myself up to you guys. And he'd just have Q&As where people would just talk about anything under the sun and ask questions. And, some people obviously don't like doing that in a public setting. So they give him a call, they'll Slack him, they'll email him, and he responds, and he is willing to take that time and really invest back in his employees. He always says employees are the best asset and most important asset. And it's true. It's completely true.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of how you learn, especially, as a young company, right? And as a continuously growing company, you have to learn from your employees, and just your employees really setting the tone from that with that open feedback, driving leadership to make changes in the moment, right? It's not like we have to kind of sit down and write these memos and just hope that they change, but being able to have that open door policy where now something changes possibly tomorrow or maybe by the end of the day. And I like this entire conversation, which is a conversation that I often have in my space of financial services and the technology space around retention, right? We're always talking so much around diversity and inclusion and really what that means. But it's also about the retention piece of things, right? It's like you can hire and keep on hiring, and that's also really important. But what are you all doing to really make sure that you're retaining that talent there and you're building in for not just the culture fit, but also for the value fit going forward for anyone who wants to step into the company and know that they'll be represented well?
Absolutely. So culture fit, I think, is interesting because if you go back 5 to 7 years ago, maybe even less, most companies had a culture fit portion of the interview for candidates that was weighed maybe just as much, if not more, than technical requirements for the role. The way I viewed culture fit at the time was, will this person be able to mesh within the company and ultimately be successful? And at the time, this seemed like the right thing to do. You don't really want to bring in a bad apple that's going to bring down this culture that you work so hard, spend so much money to build and to sustain, right? And so now looking back, I see, though, that this wasn't the best approach. When I look back at Taulia 8 years ago when I started, the culture we had then was completely different than the culture we have now. And that's because companies and people evolve, and hence so do cultures, right? And so, and this is normal and healthy too. So why would we want to hire someone that just fits into the culture? And I think this is where this kind of concept of culture add comes in that we've been implementing at Taulia. Someone that's going to really come in and add to the culture and help move it forward. It's such a simple one-word change, but it really helps add more perspective, I think, to what you're looking for. And then from a values fit perspective, on the other hand, I think of my husband and I. He and I are very different in so many ways. Our musical interests, TV shows, what we want to eat for dinner, you name it, we're probably on opposite ends of the spectrum. But what we are similar in is our values. We have a set of core values that we both align on, which I think makes our relationship work really well. But we also appreciate the fact that we're different. We can introduce each other to new things and learn from each other. And I think this works in the same way as for companies. The company and you really need to ensure your values align, but it can be actually quite beneficial to have differences in the way of doing things, because that's what sparks innovation, new ideas, new solutions. And then I think the second part was you asked about how we're kind of why retention is important. Is that correct? So I think for hiring it's great, right? We need to do it. Diverse hiring is important, but that's one portion of this DE&I concept, right? Our CFO, who I mentioned before, he always says diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And so your numbers could be fantastic for diversity hiring, but if your numbers for actually retaining them are awful, then you're missing that inclusion piece, right? And so you're only kind of hitting the D piece in DE&I and not the I. So I think both are equally important. It's a three-prong scale there. So.
Yeah, and you said so many things that are really important too, especially around the evolution of culture fit and really what that means. Because I do think that sometimes when companies do start out, it's like we have all these things that we like and we want to do, and we kind of hone in on those from a culture perspective. But as we move and as we have new people come in, sometimes those things don't change. over time. And it's like we're bringing in new people, but they really aren't fitting in to that particular culture because the culture itself just needs to change and whatever those core values are, right? And we can have those differences and still get along. How are you all, or how do you think other companies can start to implement new cultures, and how can they really use their employees to help them do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's being very intentional about culture. Culture to some degree is organic, but to some degree it's also built, right? If you want to build a culture of inclusivity, of diversity, then you really need to be intentional. And to be honest, I think that really starts from the top. I don't think there's any other way to go about it. I think you have to really just live it. You can make as many kind of posters as you want, get as much swag printed with your values on it as you want, but at the end of the day, you have to live it.
Swag out there.
Yeah, so much swag, right?
I think we all have enough reward bottles.
Yeah, so many t-shirts. I have like 5 t-shirt drawers at this point, and I still will grab a t-shirt if they give it to me at any point.
That's my problem, right?
Yeah, that's my problem. But I think it's just truly living it and being intentional. And one thing that I really appreciate about Taulia is just how much our core values are referenced on a day-to-day basis. It's not just something that we put on the wall. It's not just something we wear on our t-shirts. I'll give you an example. We have 3 core values at Taulia, and one of them is diversity is how we grow. So this year, for example, Taulia is hiring quite a bit, and all of these roles need to have been hired yesterday, like most startup open recs. But you'll hear diversity is how we grow when recruiters are speaking to hiring managers, because we're actively trying to go out there, get seen by folks that maybe aren't viewing the normal places we post. And this takes time, right? It's not a quick process. It takes time, and it's painful for the people that are on the company end, right? Kind of doing 2, 3, maybe 4 jobs at once. But we all know this is the right thing to do, and it's us living by our values, which is top priority.
Right, and intention is like half of that, right? It's like continuously finding opportunities to be intentional. And that's really the only way that companies are able to continue to scale and move forward, is that intentional action, right? There's always been so much conversation, to your point, around diversity, but it's really the inclusion piece that we really have to get right. So when we're bringing people into our organizations, we know that we're bringing them in a way that they're going to be received well, they're going to be supported and encouraged. And I think that's what a lot of people seem to be looking for at this point. And I want to get to some questions that I'm seeing in the audience so we don't run out of time for those. How do you determine a candidate's value fit with a company, or speak directly to your company?
Absolutely. So before, we used to have a culture fit kind of portion of the interview. This is years ago. We now call it a culture add or a value add portion. And this is what we do is we'll have people not even from the same kind of team. We'll have it from outside, just kind of talk to this person, talk about the ways that what our company believes in, what are our core values, really speak to them, give real life examples. I just gave you the example of hiring and diversity is how we grow. We want to show you real life examples of what that is. It's very easy to bring someone on board, but you need to make sure that a wrong hire is one of the worst things you could do, right? It's very expensive. It's very draining. It's time consuming.
Stage or any small company, right?
It's really, a wrong hire can be really detrimental to, especially small startups, right? It's time consuming and it costs a ton. So I think really we spend the time to explain to the folks of what it is that we're looking for, how Taulia succeeds, and finding out their own values. What do they value? A big part in determining that is seeing the types of questions they're asking us. Are you asking us questions about how the company succeeds or your own role? We are very collaborative. We're very team oriented at Taulia. It's something that is really ingrained into our culture. So we want to see the types of questions you're asking, what is important to you throughout the interview process. And it's a checkpoint, quite frankly, from the recruiter screen all the way to the in-person interviews of, this is how we at Taulia, what we value. These are our core values. This is our vision. This is how we get things done. Is that something that you align with? Is that something that you see yourself believing in? Our vision is very important to us. And we want to bring on people that feel that same vision, even if maybe their way of going about it will be different, because that's the beauty in bringing on diverse talent.
Absolutely. There's always that give and take, right? I think now is a good time where we're really asking the questions, not so much as what we can bring to the table as companies, but where, how do you see yourself here? How do you also, as the interviewee, want to see, the company that you're going to be stepping into to ensure that it's also that good fit for you on the other side of that. I do have a question about how do you feel about just the financial technology industry in general, and how it's just really kind of changing the tide in a lot of diversity that's going on within different industries. I think that the financial fintech industry is really kind of changing the narrative for so many people to get into this place that maybe they haven't been in before, where we're looking at more so going into finance was always on the kind of the corporate side, but now you're seeing so much inclusion on the technical side. How do you see that continuing in the next maybe 3 to 5 years?
Absolutely. I think, what's so interesting is this space of fintech. So I'll give Taulia as an example. We started off as a predominantly tech company. When I started here, we were a tech startup. That is kind of how we classified ourselves. And as of late, as of the past few years, we're a fintech. We have been bringing on some more of those folks from the fin side of things, from banks, from larger financial organizations. And it's really beautiful to see the mesh of, tech people and fin people and learning from each other. And I think as more and more organizations like Taulia and other fintechs, or even just emergences of any kind of industries together, you're just learning from each other, right? What I think is beautiful about the pandemic is now we saw that you can really work from anywhere. You can work on anything, and you're no longer kind of nestled into one category, one sector. You can be open to anything. And I think especially in fintech, you're seeing this emergence of so many amazing fintechs, especially in the Bay Area. And it's just learning from each other, right? You'll see so many of the finance folks learn how the tech is built within a company and learn more of that. And you'll see so many of the tech people now learning the finance aspect of the business, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, it's so important to just the overall growth of the industry and just, companies like yours as well. Yeah. Where do you see Taulia's kind of growth and evolution as its placement within financial technology, as you all continue to evolve and, continuing to just reshape your value and culture fit for people who want to get in to either working with you all or just kind of into this industry in general?
Absolutely. A number of different things. So as I mentioned, in our hiring efforts, we are trying to go out there and we are open to so many different types of jobs. We are going out there hiring interns. Hey, do you want to learn this business from us? Come, we will teach you. We will give you kind of some of the learnings that we have here. We are also on the other side, trying to actively go out there. We're partnering with a number of different organizations, veterans groups, neurodiverse individual groups, and trying to go out there and say, hey, we are inclusive of all of everyone within the community. We want to help grow folks. I think that's something that's really important. We've seen lately the lack in diversity in both, actually, in tech and in finance. We're in both of these industries, and there's a huge lack in diversity in both. So a big portion of it is bringing in people and having them learn, and actively us taking that responsibility on as an employer to go out there and search for talent, because maybe just posting on LinkedIn is not enough, right? We're kind of hitting the same group of folks, and we're trying to change that up, even if it takes more time, if it costs more money. We know it's the right thing to do, and it'll ultimately only be better for our business as well.
Yeah, and it's really, again, about putting yourself in those intentional spaces. I mean, like you're saying, LinkedIn, isn't always just the one-stop shop of finding people. And it's important to say, hey, well, here is a college or here's a university that I'm now going to go directly to bring in more of that global talent to our organization, which is extremely important to continue to do so. So I want to get to another question in the chat here. And someone's asking, how do they start a conversation in an interview regarding company value? Is it fine to ask, for example, how do you describe your company's values? What are the things that, people are kind of asking when they're in that interview process as well? And what can you kind of break down versus interviews that you've either sat in on or conducted yourself?
Absolutely. If I got asked that question, and I have a couple of times in the past, I think it's amazing. I think it's a huge sign of someone that's really not just looking for their next job, but looking for somewhere that they could grow and be a culture add for the company, right? And I think in those situations, if you're questioning, oh, can I not ask this person about their values? If values are important to you, maybe you might want to look at the company again and say, oh, maybe is this somewhere I really want to work? If I don't even feel like I can, right? If I can't even ask them about.
Yeah, those checks of that intuition saying, if I don't feel comfortable asking, there's probably a reason why I don't feel comfortable.
Exactly. And the thing about it is, something that I am really big on is you can get the job, but you have to be in the job, right? So you can get it. You could be part of a company, and maybe you don't ask that question of values, and you kind of go into it. You'll find out what their values are very quickly within a role, whether you like it or not.
It does not take long to figure out whether the culture or the value just meet at all, right?
Absolutely. So it's better to get it out in the interview process rather than joining a company and then figuring it out and saying, I actually don't align with these values and I don't actually want to be here, right? So I highly encourage that.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to someone, interestingly enough, about this specific thing not too long ago, where there were promises made in different interviews where like, yeah, we do this and we do this for you, and all this about the culture fit, and then you get in there and you realize that it's nothing. You were kind of sold the baby. What is it? The baby without the bathwater type of. You get in there and you're just like, now you're kind of feeling stuck, right? What do you feel about companies that are, not necessarily doing all the things internally, and how do you think that they can change?
Absolutely. I don't understand companies that try to sell something they are not, because people have the ability to leave, right? The US is an at-will employer, right? So you have the ability to leave. So I don't understand that, but that's beyond the point. But I think if you are at an organization and you think that the company needs to take a stance on something or do, help better their culture in some sense, I think you should feel empowered to go and do that, or I at least hope that you are working for a company in which you could feel empowered to do that. Because our DE&I task force was started a few years ago, and it was started by someone that really felt like they needed to have this within the organization. And it's now become such a big part of our culture. It's part of our goals. It's one of our 3 core values. And so I highly encourage you and companies that are in that position, just one person to get it started, because it's probably likely that others would want to join you in that as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation, and I know we have to wrap up, but thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you so much, Anjali, and thank you so much, Dana. It was such an incredible conversation, and you talked about so many different points that were so important, and there were people praising things that you were saying in the chat.